The scene opens in a candlelit tavern, the kind that would have existed in the 14th century. A smoky haze fills the air. The chatter of drunkards mingles with the strumming of a lute in the corner. At first glance, the place seems like a sanctuary of warmth and laughter, a refuge for weary travelers and peasants escaping the weight of feudal life. The innkeeper wipes a mug with a filthy rag, while shouting for more ale to be brought from the cellar. But beneath this surface of merriment lurks something more sinister. Medieval taverns were not just drinking halls. They were dens of schemes, crimes, and forbidden pleasures. Behind the heavy oak door, secrets thrived in the shadows. Plots of rebellion whispered over mugs of mead, prostitutes and thieves cutting deals, mercenaries bargaining for blood money. And while outsiders believed taverns were harmless social hubs, authorities viewed them as dangerous nests of chaos that could undermine the entire social order. Tonight, we're going to step inside these places, peeling back their cheery facade to reveal a world of treachery, violence, and darkness. Ale was the lifeblood of taverns, but it was also a weapon. Brewing was rarely regulated, and tavern keepers often watered down drinks or mixed them with harmful additives to maximize profits. Historical records reveal that sawdust, chalk, and even poisonous herbs were sometimes used to stretch a batch. For peasants who relied on ale as a safer alternative to water, this meant sickness or death was a nightly risk. Imagine stepping into a tavern after a day of backbreaking labor, handing over your last coin, and gulping down what you thought was nourishment, only to spend the night doubled over in agony. Tavern keepers wielded immense power over the health of their patrons, and some didn't hesitate to exploit it. What's worse, rulers and church officials knew these dangers, but taverns were too valuable as tax hubs and information-gathering centers to be truly stamped out. The very institutions meant to protect the people often turned a blind eye, allowing the corruption of the ale trade to flourish. By the flickering light of torches, another truth comes into focus. Taverns doubled as brothels. In fact, the two often blended so seamlessly that the line between a drinking house and a house of sin was nearly invisible. Prostitutes, sometimes called tavern wenches in contemporary accounts, were as common as mugs of ale, and for many tavern keepers, sex was far more profitable than drink. Women, some coerced, some desperate, sold themselves in cramped rooms above or behind a common hall. To the church, taverns were breeding grounds of damnation, a place where lust and drunkenness joined forces to drag souls to hell. To city officials, they were public health disasters, spreading diseases that physicians of the age barely understood. But to the patrons, these shadowy encounters were irresistible, and so the system thrived. The tavern's reputation as a house of hospitality was a mask. Underneath, it was often a front for one of the oldest trades in history. Beyond drunken laughter, another sound haunted taverns, the whisper of crime. Thieves, mercenaries, and smugglers found taverns the perfect hunting ground. Travelers carried coin purses, strangers carried secrets, and a well-placed dagger could earn a thief a week's worth of meals. Some tavern owners themselves conspired with criminals, offering lodging to gangs or providing information on wealthy guests who could be ambushed after leaving. Chroniclers wrote of entire taverns turning into dens of organized crime, where stolen goods were fenced and assassinations plotted. In the flicker of firelight, hands shook on blood deals, and a nod to the innkeeper could mean the difference between safety and betrayal. To walk into certain taverns was to gamble not just your money, but your life. Yet taverns were not lawless havens outside society's gaze. They were also under constant scrutiny. Kings and lords feared the gatherings of commoners in these noisy rooms, worried that drunken conversation could turn into conspiracy. Some taverns became hotbeds of rebellion, where peasants whispered about rising against their lords or merchants schemed against the crown's taxes. Authorities responded by planning informants, regulating hours of operation, and sometimes raiding taverns suspected of harboring dissidents. But here lies the irony. While rulers feared the chaos of taverns, they also depended on them for surveillance and revenue. Taverns paid heavy taxes, and the crown often granted licenses selectively, turning them into pee. The candle burns low, and the tavern grows quiet. A few drunkards lie unconscious at the tables, while the innkeeper bolts the doors for the night. But outside, the reputation of this place lingers. Part home, part hell, a sanctuary and a snare. Taverns were more than gathering places. They were the beating heart of medieval society's shadow life. For every song sung, there was a secret whispered. For every drink poured, there was a danger lurking. To step into a medieval tavern was to gamble with your health, your money, your body, and sometimes even your soul. And so, as we raise a glass to history, let's remember, behind the laughter and the music, the taverns of the Middle Ages hid some of the darkest secrets of their time. But taverns did not only harbor criminals. They attracted spies. Kings and lords feared what might be whispered over mugs of ale, and so they planted informants. The noisy hall, filled with loosened tongues, was the perfect place to gather intelligence. A soldier complaining about low pay, a merchant muttering about unfair taxes, a peasant hinting at rebellion. These were golden nuggets for rulers. Informants posed as drunkards, travelers, or even in staff, carefully listening, then reporting to the crown. Many arrests and executions began with a careless word spoken in a tavern. The very walls had ears. For the common man, it was impossible to tell who was friend and who was spy. The cost of speaking freely over ale could be your freedom or your head. Violence was always near the surface. One careless insult, one lost dice game, one wandering hand, and chaos erupted. Tavern brawls were legendary, and they rarely ended in just bruises. Knives were drawn, mugs smashed into skulls, chairs hurled across the room. Chroniclers tell of brawls escalating into riots that spilled into the streets, leaving bodies in the mud. The tavern floor was often sticky with blood by morning, the tables scarred by blades. For many men, the tavern was not just a place to drink, but to prove their strength. To back down was shameful. To fight was expected. These eruptions of violence gave taverns a reputation as places of danger, where merriment could turn to murder in the blink of an eye. The tavern was not just about ale. Food was part of the trade, and it was often rotten. Meat pies stuffed with scraps of gristle, bread filled with sawdust, fish long past freshness. All were sold to hungry patrons who had no choice but to eat. Some taverns openly cheated customers, charging high prices for rancid meals. Others deliberately kept portions small to force patrons into ordering more ale. Food poisoning was common, and deaths not unheard of. For peasants, the tavern meal was a gamble as dangerous as the ale. Yet hunger drove them back, night after night, because even bad food was better than none. The tavern thus became a symbol of sin, not just of lust and drunkenness, but of gluttony, fraud, and exploitation.